The man walked ashore and came to a bustling park. Facing the gazes of the aunts and the police, he did not feel embarrassed at all, but was used to it, because he had experienced such things many times. The man named Henry was an old monster who lived for 200 years and possessed an immortal body. The thing he did not lack the most was time. He traveled around the world and spoke countless languages. He searched for the secret to his immortality. The only problem was that people around him had changed, but he was still a handsome man. Today, Henry took the subway to work as usual. Henry sat next to a blonde girl. He only glanced at her and greeted her in fluent Russian. She was curious how he knew she was Russian. Henry explained that there was chocolate on the corner of her mouth and that there was a half-eaten, known chocolate in her bag. This made the girl immediately feel good about him. Henry continued to say that he noticed that her fingers had marks far apart, but there were no marks on her chin, so she must be a cello player. He also wished her a successful performance tonight. She was even more delighted after hearing that. She enthusiastically invited him to watch her performance, and she said that after the performance, they could have a drink together. He happily accepted the invitation, but the next second, the whole train became a disaster. Henry was immediately stabbed in the heart by a steel bar. The girl also died. Before he could express his feelings, she died. Henry had witnessed countless deaths in his life, but he was an immortal with the supernatural power of unlimited resurrection. This skill began 200 years ago. On a merchant ship of the evil capitalist, Henry, as a doctor on board, treated an old man who had a cold, but the captain insisted that the old man had cholera, so he wanted to throw him into the sea to feed the fish. Henry defended the cause and was shot dead by the captain. Henry was then thrown into the sea. Since that night, Henry has been merciful to God. Henry has undergone a mysterious transformation. Every time he experiences death, Henry returns to the same body of water. The only thing that is a bit awkward is that every time Henry returns, he is in his original state. This makes him think that reincarnation is not a good thing. On the contrary, he feels cursed. Seeing the police approaching aggressively, Henry quickly explained that he did not do it on purpose. When Henry left the police station, he turned around and saw his son Abe coming to pick him up. This was also the only person who knew Henry's secret. The two quickly returned to Abe's antique shop. Henry told Abe what happened today. Countless personal experiences have made Henry a true death researcher. Therefore, Henry also became a super good forensic doctor. Every day, Henry works with cold corpses. Henry believes that to understand death, he must go to places where there are the most deaths. At the same time, Detective Joe arrives at the scene of the accident. Joe finds Henry's pocket watch in the train, but at this time, she does not know who the owner of the watch is. At this time, Joe's boss comes to tell her that the forensic doctor at the scene believes that the dispatcher died of heart disease. Therefore, they judge that the train collision was an accident and not caused by humans. She tells Joe to go to the forensic office to sign the dispatcher's cause of death. If there were no surprises, they could close the case. Joe had just entered the forensic office when she received the order. At this moment, Joe saw Henry performing an autopsy on the dispatcher. This was the first time the two had met. They immediately got to work. After Henry cut open the dispatcher's sternum, he could tell by the naked eye that there was something wrong with his death. Henry meant that he did not die of heart disease. Then Henry took out a handful of foam from the corpse. The thick foam showed that the dispatcher had pulmonary edema. Therefore, Henry speculated that he was poisoned, but a toxicology report was needed to confirm it. Joe was a little skeptical. Lucas told Joe not to doubt anything. As long as Henry confirmed the cause of death, it was almost certain. This meant that the accident had become a murder case involving 15 people. At this moment, Henry received a hidden phone call from a stranger. Not only did this person know about the subway accident, he also knew that Henry had survived. When Henry heard this, his attitude immediately changed. Henry asked who he was, but the person immediately hung up. Henry panicked and returned to the antique store and began packing his things. Henry prepared to take Abe to a strange city. However, Abe had no intention of leaving. Abe told Henry that hiding was not the way. The important thing now was to find out who this person was and what his purpose was. But for Henry, the painful experiences of the past were still clear. Even though it had been 107 years, Henry thought about being forced to be a human experiment. Every drop of blood in his body was drained. His organs were also dissected in the name of science. Even though he has an immortal body, the pain is real. This makes him extremely scared. Abe said that Henry cannot stay with a dead body all day. Even though Henry has an immortal body, Abe will pretend to leave him. So Henry needs to stay away from danger and live his life well. After Henry thought carefully, he chose to stay. Joe discovered a suspicious figure through the subway station's surveillance camera. He was holding the pocket watch she found. She told the technician to enlarge the video first. Then she carefully looked at it again and again. Is this Henry, the person Joe just met today? The next day, Henry went to work and received a mysterious letter with no postmark or return address. office. Lucas also did not see anyone delivering the letter. Henry returned to the office and opened the envelope. When he saw what was inside, he was stunned. The photo was an intimate photo of him and a girl. This girl was his deceased wife. The time was 1955. They took a photo together at a party. He didn't know how the mysterious person got the photo, but it was clear that the other party's purpose was not simple. At the same time, there was also a newspaper clipping inside. QED has a proof commonly used in mathematical proofs. Henry saw the content in the lower half of the newspaper clipping and immediately understood something. Then Henry went to the morgue to pull out coordinator's body and took a tube of blood from him because the mysterious person killed the coordinator to prove whether Henry was dead or not. So Henry wanted to find out what kind of poison he used, and by making a big confession, he could find the culprit behind the scene. And the most convenient way to find the poison was to use the blood of the dead person. Henry decided to take advantage of his immortal body to test the poison himself to find the answer. After Abe injected blood into Henry's body, within 5 seconds he began the familiar process. Henry was then taken back by Abe. Fortunately, Henry discovered that the poison was extracted from aconite flowers. This poison works very quickly. Just by contact with the skin, it can enter the circulatory system, causing stomach burns and lung swelling. However, before Henry could take the next step, Joe led people to take Henry to the police station. Through the pocket watch found and the things searched in the basement, the police speculated that Henry was the culprit. At this time, Henry told Joe that he discovered aconite. Based on the fast-acting properties of this poison, Henry assumed that the culprit must have been on the subway at that time. Henry was talking very enthusiastically when he suddenly realized something was wrong. Why did it seem like he had put his head in it himself? And the police thought so too, so they invited him back to investigate. During the autopsy, why didn't he hide the truth and say that the coordinator was poisoned? He wouldn't do something so stupid as to hand himself over to the police. Joe thought Henry's analysis was reasonable. At the moment, the police didn't have any solid evidence to prove it, so they could only let Henry leave first. Henry returned to the workshop and carefully examined the coordinator's body with his colleagues. Sure enough, they found a needle mark on his ear, and there was also a clear fingerprint next to it. Obviously, this was left by the murderer. The next day, Henry brought the evidence to the police station and hoped that Joe could quickly find the culprit based on fingerprints. They quickly found a man named Han, but his house was closed and there was no one there. Henry discovered a dead rat from poisoning in his backyard. Next to it was a room full of aconite plants. Going inside, they also saw a room full of laboratory equipment. Obviously, this was where poison was made. At this moment, the sound of the door opening came from outside. Immediately after, they saw Han entering. Joe raised his gun to arrest Han, but he threw the bottle of poison at him. At this time, Henry was completely unable to chase the culprit because the poison had already begun to enter Joe's circulatory system. Henry only had 1 minute left. Henry took the ethanol on the table and poured it on Joe's hand. Using the fastest speed to neutralize the toxicity of the poison at this time, he was able to save Joe's life. Through investigation, Han was a chemical expert. Han's wife fell onto the subway lines 3 years ago and died. The train driver who hit her and killed her was the dispatcher who had just died. So the collision was planned by Han, but Henry was a little confused. Henry thought the mysterious person was targeting him. The police quickly discovered more poison. Judging by the volume, it was probably 2 gallons. There were also traces of ethanol inside. Henry speculated that Han wanted to turn the poison of the aconite flower into a solvent to create a large amount of poison. Perhaps Han's goal was to kill more people. At this time, Henry saw many strange drawings on the table. He slipped one over and found that its shape was exactly the same as the one on the ceiling of the central station he had visited many years ago. This was the place where Han's wife was killed. Everyone immediately realized the seriousness of the problem. The police quickly surrounded the central station. The lobby was packed with people, and Han was nowhere to be seen. Henry observed that there were ventilation holes all over the walls. Tonight seemed special. It was cold, but the air conditioner was on. Galen guessed that Han had turned the poison into a solvent so that it could spread in the air. Then the two went to the top floor where the ventilation system was installed, but they didn't find anything unusual. Henry thought he was thinking too much. Suddenly, after Joe fell down, Henry was treated as free labor. He forced Henry to put poison in the ventilation system. Henry originally intended to use reason to convince Han, but he didn't listen. Han threatened Henry that he had a gun in his hand. Then Han quickly and accurately shot Henry in the chest. At the crucial moment, Henry stood up with strong will and jumped down, hugging Han. The two immediately lost their breath, and Henry entered the time tunnel. When Jo woke up in the hospital, the first thing she saw was a handsome man standing by the window. Henry told Jo that she had been shot, and Han realized his mistake at the last minute and jumped off the building. The poison had not been released, but Jo always felt that something was wrong. She vaguely saw the two people hugging and jumping off the building. Henry thought it might be a side effect of the anesthesia. At this moment, the hidden person's phone called again and told Henry that they were the same. Both of them wanted death to be something they could not choose. They shared the same pain, curse, and torment. Since they could not find a way to resolve it now, they should find some joy together and be soulmates forever. Henry did not know what his true purpose was. Henry then said goodbye to Jo and prepared to leave. Henry walked out of the hospital room and was immediately lost in his memories. He had experienced countless deaths, countless sufferings and torments in his life, but his only confidant was his wife. The two met during World War II. Henry, a war doctor, saw his wife save a newborn baby. They fell in love and became a couple at first sight. The baby they saved was Abe. That is, Abe was now old, and Henry was still the same as when he was young. After Jo was discharged from the hospital, she went to Henry and returned her pocket watch to him. Jo also invited Henry to do her forensics. With Abe's help, Henry readily agreed. A fat, agile man was hacked to death with an axe, but Henry only opened the victim's mouth to look, and he confirmed that he died of an accident. The policeman asked Henry with a bewildered expression if he had looked carefully. There was an axe stuck in the victim's head. This was definitely a murder. Jo also said that there were witnesses who heard the victim arguing with his neighbor 20 minutes before he died. Henry thought about it and explained it one by one. Looking at the victim's clothes, Henry knew that he was a football fan. Henry guessed that there must have been a fierce game last night. Hansen later confirmed that the game was indeed fierce. The victim's blood alcohol test was over the standard, indicating that he was probably drunk at the time. He mistook the power outage for a problem with his satellite antenna. The tar on his knees showed that he had climbed onto the roof. Wood splinters between his white teeth showed that he had an axe in his mouth. Damp surface and wet leaves showed that he slipped and fell from the ladder. The slight fracture of the 15th vertebrae showed that he fell backwards. At this moment, the axe fell due to gravity. Coincidentally, it hit the victim between the eyebrows. So Henry confirmed that the victim died of an accident. Hansen said that coroner had given the results of the examination, so they had nothing more to say. So they should go home, take a shower, and go to bed early. Just as the two were about to leave, Henry called them back and said that Victoria's cause of death was very suspicious. Last night, Victoria cried out in pain, begging the person on the other end of the phone to pick up. Then she urged the driver to drive faster, but the taxi just arrived at Victoria Bridge and asked to stop immediately. Before the driver could stop the car completely, she hurriedly opened the car door and ran out. Then, in the driver's horrified eyes, she climbed onto the railing. Then passers-by heard a scream followed by the sound of falling into the water. The next day, Victoria's body was found on the shore. Jo said that there was a witness who confirmed that Victoria jumped in. But from Henry's professional perspective, he discovered that there were paint chips between her fingernails. This type of paint was not allowed to be used after 1970. This showed that Victoria's fingernails had scratched off at least 12 layers of paint, and the wear marks on her shoes showed that she was struggling. Henry also discovered that Victoria's fracture extended from her big toe to her tibia. This showed that when her body was impacted, she faced the bridge. He had lived for 200 years and had never seen anyone jump for a long time and then turn around halfway. So Henry speculated that Victoria had been murdered. After Jo heard this, she decided to start an investigation. But Hansen thought that Victoria might have turned around and slipped and fell. Based on Henry's words alone, they could not conclude that it was murder. But Jo said Henry was never wrong, and she turned around and walked out. When Jo returned to the police station, her superiors looked for Jo to talk. She said that at that time, many people saw Victoria jumping off the bridge by herself, so they didn't need to waste their energy on such a case. She also told Jo to be stronger in her work. Jo couldn't let a forensic judgment affect her. They still had many really important cases to investigate. At the same time, in the forensic room, Lucas told Henry that the police had called and hoped they would give the result that the victim had done something stupid. At that moment, Henry saw Victoria's parents coming to pick up her body. He quickly ran out to cover the body to avoid the heartbreaking scene. Victoria's parents said that their daughter couldn't do anything stupid because she had just gotten a master's degree in classical literature. She was going to study abroad in Paris soon. They asked if there were any other unexpected things that had happened. Henry didn't know how to answer, so he just advised them to discuss this matter with police. Seeing the parents of the victims in pain, Henry expressed his sympathy for their pain. To reassure them, Henry specially went to the bridge that night to find out the truth about Victoria's jump. He carefully climbed up the bridge railing and indeed discovered fingernail scratches. There were also men's shoe prints beside them. Just as Henry was feeling pleased, he looked up and saw a climbing lock. Henry spent a lot of effort to finally get the evidence, but he almost fell down because he slipped. But then, Henry climbed up. The next second, Henry was hit by a car, and the driver was bewildered and scared. He quickly got out of the car to check. At this time, Henry was sitting on the time machine and returning to the familiar area. The driver walked around the car, even examined the undercarriage, but he couldn't find a single hair. He clearly felt like he had hit someone, but there was nothing. Could it be that he had hit a ghost? At this time, Henry hurriedly got into the car and was picked up by Abe. The next day, as soon as Henry went to work, he was informed that the nail polish in Victoria's fingernails matched the nail polish used on the bridge, and they also discovered something surprising. Lucas took out a piece of skin that didn't belong to Victoria under the cuticle. They guessed that she had left it when she struggled with the murderer before she died. The new discovery made Henry very happy, but soon after, Henry was in no mood anymore when there was a gift on his desk. Henry was immediately worried and scared. When he saw what was inside, he remembered the mysterious person's phone call. Who was this person? Why did it feel like he was always following Henry? Henry hurried home to share this with Abe. The feeling of being held in someone's palm was worse than not being able to die. Abe discovered that the letter was written on striped paper. The watermark on it was also from an earlier period. Just when they were about to find out the origin of the paper, Joe found it. Even though he had been warned by his superiors not to investigate the girl's case, Joe still believed Henry's judgment for some reason. Joe found out that the day Victoria had an accident was the day she was preparing to leave for Paris, and the boarding procedures had already been completed. For someone about to do something foolish, doing such things was obviously strange. So the two went to Victoria's school to investigate. When they arrived at the dormitory, they found her parents packing up her belongings. Henry carefully discovered that Victoria loved mountain climbing, but her parents had just said that she and her boyfriend had broken up a long time ago. So who took her photo? There was another suspicious detail here. Joe asked them if Victoria had any other hobbies. The father said they hadn't been in contact for a long time. Victoria was busy writing her thesis all day and translating an ancient manuscript found in Egypt with the professor. At this time, Victoria's mother showed Henry a photo of her when she was young. Henry saw Victoria's mother in pain, so he leaned closer and said that they would quickly find out who did this. After they went out, Joe was a little worried and told Henry not to promise Victoria's mother like that. Joe secretly investigated. If her superiors found out, she would be in big trouble. Moreover, there were many cases like this that went unsolved for years. But for Henry, the thing he didn't lack the most was time. So Henry and Joe went to Victoria's school to investigate. They learned from Victoria's parents that she had been with her professor recently. The two of them, along with a blonde young man on the stairs, went to Professor James to verify. At the same time, the young man praised Professor James to the fullest. He was full of admiration for Professor James. He expressed his utmost respect to Professor James. Jack entered the password and opened the door of the research room. When Professor James saw Joe, he quickly ended the lecture. When he learned that they came to ask about Victoria's problem, Professor James said that she was one of his most intelligent students. They had recently studied ancient manuscripts together. Victoria was deeply attracted to the content inside. They even wrote a related essay. It was about to be published, but unfortunately Victoria was dead now. The signatures on it were those of Professor James and Victoria. After Professor James finished speaking, he naturally put the pen in his mouth. His hand removed the entangled scarf. Henry asked James with some doubt if he smoked. James said he didn't smoke. When Henry asked about the relationship between James and Victoria, he clearly hesitated a bit before saying that it was just a private colleague relationship. They didn't interact often. And when Victoria had the incident, James and his wife were at the opera house. However, after they went out, Henry kept saying that Professor James and Victoria had a secret relationship. There were cigarette stains on Victoria's bedsheet. Joe said that it was also possible that Victoria smoked herself. Henry had checked Victoria's teeth and lungs and determined that she didn't smoke, but Professor James sometimes couldn't help himself, and the photo of climbing in Victoria's room was taken by James. The scarf Victoria was wearing was also the one on James's desk. Joe admired Henry's observation skills. What made Joe admire him even more was that Henry had secretly obtained a DNA test sample. The results showed that the sample on Victoria's fingernails completely matched the sample on James's pen. It seemed that the case was about to be solved. To determine whether James's alibi was true or not, the two went to his house to visit his wife. The wife testified for him without hesitation, but Henry said that her husband had cheated on her, so she didn't need to lie for him. The woman didn't understand what Henry meant. Henry explained that there were two programs on the table. One was crumpled and the other was brand new. This proved that she had waited for James at the door, but he didn't didn't show up. Henry also guessed that she knew that her husband was having an affair and that she had tried to save their relationship. Because the photos on the table were all covered with dust, only one photo of them together when they were young was dust-free. Henry guessed that this was a new photo that she had put up to remind her of the days when they were in love. Seeing this, she no longer hid it. She admitted that she was not with her husband that night. James was quickly summoned to the police station to be investigated for murder. Not only did James not admit that he was the murderer, he also said that Victoria was the woman he loved most. But James was already a 65-year-old man, while Victoria was only 22. James did not want to waste Victoria's youth, so he chose to break up. After listening, Henry said that everything James said was true. Henry believed that Victoria was not killed by James. At this moment, James's lawyer came to bail him out. Unexpectedly, this would lead to a greater tragedy. At the same time, Abe found out that the paper was a product of a paper mill in Milan, but the paper mill was destroyed during World War II. The text at the top of the paper was the logo of a local hotel called Montorio. Unfortunately, it had closed 60 years ago. Henry immediately remembered that in 1945, after he and his wife had made love in the hotel, he left a letter for her and left alone. Unexpectedly, after waking up, his wife had changed. She didn't care about his special identity, and she didn't care about the outcome. She believed that the meaning of life was the journey, not how long it could last. Just cherish the time you can spend together. Henry had been enlightened since then. He believed in James' love for Victoria. James suggested breaking up, but Victoria didn't want to. Someone took advantage of this to lure Victoria to the bridge. Victoria was surprised when she saw that it wasn't the person she wanted to see. Victoria would definitely use something to resist. Then Henry used force to open Victoria's mouth, and sure enough, he pulled out a piece of human flesh. Henry asked Lucas to compare his genes with James's. At this moment, Joe came and told them that they didn't need it anymore because they had discovered James's body. The police thought that he committed suicide because the students said they saw him mentally depressed and there was a suicide note on the table. But after Henry checked, he said that James was murdered. Everyone was a little suspicious. Henry said that someone had injected James with sedatives, and the cut on his wrist was from the inside out. Henry had seen too many people commit suicide with a razor, and they were all cuts from the outside in, and the murderer was left-handed. Joe didn't understand how Henry knew. Henry said that the T in the suicide note was all tilted backwards. Moreover, there was a word used incorrectly. James would never make such a mistake. After that, Joe considered this place a crime scene and asked everyone to review all the surveillance and leaving the building within 2 hours. They quickly discovered that James's wife had been here. At the same time, Henry discovered that James's thesis had been torn. This made Henry suddenly think of something. At this time, someone sneaked into James's research room. This person was Jack. Just as Jack was about to log into the computer, Henry interrupted. To hide his anxiety, he deliberately said that he came to help James publish his thesis. But Henry made it clear that Jack was left-handed, but he used his right hand to type on the keyboard. When James fell in love with Victoria and decided to co-author the thesis with her, Jack was sad because his name was not on it. So Jack called Victoria and told her that he wanted to jump off the bridge. He knew she was kind, so she would come to stop him. He took the opportunity to kill her. Jack did not admit that these things had anything to do with him. Henry pressed closer and told Jack that he knew that after James was taken away by the police for investigation, they would find out about him sooner or later. So he had created a scene where James did something foolish. Before that, Jack had been praising James non-stop to escape suspicion. Jack's motive for doing so was to have his name on the thesis and turn it into his own property. Jack saw that the matter had been exposed, so he stopped pretending. Jack secretly took out a box cutter and controlled Henry when he wasn't paying attention. Although Henry had an immortal body, when he looked up and saw the surveillance camera above, he was extremely scared. If he died now, his secret would be discovered. Henry struggled with Jack. Although Anna saw Henry being cornered from the surveillance camera, their whole team had acted and caught Jack at a crucial moment. Luckily, Henry only suffered superficial injuries, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to speak clearly, even if he kept his mouth shut. Henry looked up at the surveillance camera again. For the first time, Henry felt that death was terrible. The truth about Victoria's death was finally revealed. Henry personally handed over Victoria's relics to her parents. The pain of losing a loved one could not be erased, only hoping that over time the wound would gradually heal. When he returned home, Henry also thought about his wife. Unfortunately, no one else could die and come back to life. Fortunately, Ab was by Henry's side, so he was not too lonely. At this moment, Henry received a phone call from the mysterious person. The other party still knew everything about Henry. Henry did not know what person wanted to do, but Henry knew that the person had lived for 2,000 years. Henry wanted them to meet, but he was rejected. Then the mysterious person hung up. Henry did not expect that at this moment, the mysterious person medicine was less than 10 meters away from him. David had just gotten out of the taxi when suddenly, the briefcase in his hand was stolen. David did not choose to call the police, but chased after the thief. In just a few seconds, David had pinned the thief to the ground. The young thief was beaten so much that he had to beg David to stop. David's body suddenly seemed to lose control. David's whole body trembled, and he spurted blood from his nose and then fell unconscious. Considering David's death to be unusual, his body was taken to the forensic room. At the same time, Joe also captured the thief because there were no bruises or any injuries on David's body. Except for his slightly worn knuckles from beating someone, David's bone density was almost that of a young man. The only abnormality was David's brain. Henry discovered amyloid plaques in David's brain tissue. At that time, David seemed to be suffering from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's disease. At the same time, Henry also found some unknown mixture in David's stomach. There was a smell of artificial vanilla inside. Just then, Lucas came to inform them that David's son had come to claim the body. Mark said that for many years, David had been taking the train from the countryside to his mother every night. But 2 years ago, after Mark's mother passed away, David seemed to have become a different person, and he had forgotten about them. To ease this sad scene, Joe asked to see David's briefcase. After Mark's permission, they opened it. Inside was a photo of a woman. It was Mark's mother. In addition, Joe discovered a mysterious business card with no address or contact information. There was only a picture of a snake holding its tail, symbolizing eternal continuity. They were not sure if this was related to David's unusual body. To solve this doubt, Joe and Henry went to the scene where David had an accident. They found that the situation here was a bit unsuitable for old people who hated the city. Just as they were puzzled, they suddenly saw a lady getting out of a luxury car. When she left secretly, the two of them quietly followed. Then, they discovered a symbol of a snake with a tail on an anti-theft door. It seemed that this was the mysterious place on the business card. However, when they opened the door, there was a bit of a surprise. This was a lavishly decorated clinic. A promotional video was playing on a screen. Do you want to live forever? After Henry heard this, he became even more suspicious of what they were up to. Next, the two of them went to visit Dr. Gartner. When Henry asked Gartner about the main ingredient of the medicine, he refused to answer on the grounds that it was inconvenient to disclose patent. But he could be sure that the rejuvenation medicine was completely harmless. Otherwise, he would not have taken it himself every day. Joe planned to bring a sample back for testing. Gartner said that the demand for this medicine was too great. Customers had lined up from America to Central Africa, so they were really helpless, unless they had a search warrant. The two helpless people were about to leave when Henry suddenly saw the lady just now enter. Henry immediately came up with a plan and went over. He used his handsome appearance to talk to the lady. After gaining her trust, he deliberately created an incident. Just like that, Henry was able to get a bag of rejuvenation medicine. At the same time, Joe also got Gartner's fingerprints. At the same time, Lucas was checking the number of corpses when he discovered that 2 corpses had disappeared. He panicked and hurriedly asked his colleagues if anyone had seen them, but the signature book last night was Lucas's. This time, Lucas was in big trouble. After one night, Henry extracted and separated the compounds in the rejuvenation potion. He discovered that they were all extracted from cheap medicinal herbs. This showed that Gartner had lied. Gartner had cheated in the production of the potion. There might be other ingredients that caused real damage to David's brain. However, through the fingerprints on the name, Joe found out that Gartner was just a fraud. Gartner had never received any medical training. It seemed that they had to investigate Gartner thoroughly, so the two went to Gartner's private villa. At this time, Gartner was having a pool party with a group of boys and girls, but Joe exposed his dark history with Gartner in front of his girlfriend. Gartner was immediately a little worried. Gartner told his girlfriend to go down to the pool to wait for him. Then, Gartner told the two that David's death had nothing to do with him. Gartner was scared and said that he would tell everything he knew, but they needed to change places. Gartner went to change his clothes first. While the two were waiting downstairs, they saw the lady again, but she had no impression of Henry and was walking around like she was drunk. Strangely, Henry discovered that the glass of water she was holding was just soda water. While Gartner was suspicious, he heard a scream coming from upstairs. Realizing that something was wrong, the two quickly ran upstairs. But when they opened the door, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Gartner was lying in a pool of blood and had stopped breathing. Henry discovered that someone had attacked Gartner from behind. This person used his arm to strangle Gartner and then attacked him. Henry then used tweezers to remove half a disposable scalpel blade from Gartner's wound. This proved that the killer had medical knowledge. Henry returned to the office and examined Gartner's brain. Henry discovered that Gartner and David had the same neurodegenerative disease, as if someone was eating their brains. The only connection between Gartner and David was that they had both taken the elixir of youth. What exactly caused their brains to be so shattered? This reminded Henry of a colleague of his 100 100 years ago. This person had tuberculosis and was in constant pain. In order to feel better, he went to a private clinic every day for electroconvulsive therapy. Henry told him that this method was unscientific. Henry wanted to send him away. They could definitely find a better treatment. But Henry's colleagues said that tuberculosis was incurable. They didn't even know what caused the disease. They were indeed people who valued science, until it disappointed them. Henry immediately woke up and rushed to tell Joe the truth that tuberculosis was not known to be caused by bacteria and could be cured until 1882. It took the world another 20 years to learn that it could be transmitted through the milk of infected cows. Referring to the case they were investigating, Henry explained that perhaps their investigation had been wrong from the start. They had always been looking for the compound in the elixir that caused brain damage. But if the elixir itself had been contaminated with brine, it was neither a bacteria nor a fungus. It was simply made up of a small amount of protein, so no test could detect it. But when people were infected with brine, they would develop strange neurological symptoms because it was eroding and perforating the human brain. This was the reason why David and Garner's brains were shattered. To contract brine, one had to eat infected tissue, and brine's existence in human nerve tissue means that those people are eating the spinal cord. Henry thinks that the important thing now is to find out where the spinal cord comes from, so the two of them hurried to the morgue. Lucas was having a headache about the missing bodies when he suddenly heard Henry ask how many bodies had been lost recently. Lucas just told the truth and found out that in the past year, 12 bodies had been lost. All of them were anonymous and unclaimed. Henry asked Lucas to recall all the details of the day the bodies were lost. Just when Lucas mentioned eating donuts, Henry realized something was wrong. Why would Lucas, who didn't like sweets, buy donuts a few kilometers away? Lucas suddenly remembered that the driver named Anton who gave them the bodies was the one who gave him the donuts. Joe quickly issued a nationwide wanted order for Anton. Very quickly, the police surrounded Anton. At the same time, they also discovered that in the ambulance Anton was driving, there was a body that had just had its brain removed. Faced with solid evidence, Anton admitted to the crime of stealing the body and murder. Anton said that he also made the rejuvenation drug. He said that he had advanced training in chemistry and was a chemist. But after Anton moved to the US, he could only work as a driver. So Anton came up with this way to make quick money. To determine whether Anton's testimony was true or false, Henry asked Joe to ask Anton some professional knowledge about bone marrow extraction. But Anton's answers were completely inconsistent, so he was not the real mastermind. At this moment, the police brought over a list of all the customers who bought the rejuvenation drug. Henry glanced at it and suddenly ran away. It turned out that Henry had seen Abe's name on it. Henry ran straight to the antique store and asked why Abe used those rejuvenation drugs. Wouldn't it be nice to die naturally and gracefully? Abe said he didn't do it for himself. Abe was just worried that no one would take care of Henry after he died. Henry was deeply moved by these words. Fortunately, Abe, as the son of a forensic scientist, wasn't that stupid. Abe didn't believe that the rejuvenation drug had such a miraculous effect, so he specifically sought out their chemist to explain it to him. Henry asked which chemist. Abe said that it was a pretty girl. Henry immediately realized something was wrong. Through comparing portraits, they quickly discovered that the chemist was Garner's beautiful assistant. Sasha was a Ukrainian chemist. Sasha moved to the United States 2 years ago on a medical student visa and has been living with her brother. Sasha's brother, Anton, was just arrested. At the same time, Sasha went to the police station to visit her brother. Anton told her that he had confessed to all his crimes. He told her to quickly sell the remaining drugs and leave with the money. Sasha was very obedient to her brother. Although she was reluctant, she still left with a heavy heart. Unexpectedly, Sasha was caught by Abe. As soon as she reached the subway station, Abe quietly retreated and called Henry. When they found out about Sasha's whereabouts, they quickly ran over. Sasha said that Anton did all this for her. They were just too scared that these people did not deserve to die. Seeing the subway slowly approaching, Sasha was about to jump onto the tracks. At this moment, Henry rushed over and hugged Sasha. The case was finally over. The remaining people were rescued in time, so no accidents happened. The newlyweds just wanted to buy a house to live in, but the broker took them to an old neighborhood. The broker also said that this place was being eyed by a big boss who was about to be redeveloped, so buying it now would be a good deal. However, as soon as they entered the house, they smelled a pungent, unpleasant odor. Then they witnessed a horrifying scene. They saw a rotting corpse on the floor. The victim's body was full of wounds and needles. Joe quickly went to the scene with Henry. This was a gathering place for drug addicts and homeless people, so almost every week there were murders. The victim's face was gnawed by rats to the point of being unrecognizable. The police were unable to identify him for the time being. They then took the body to the forensic department. At this time, Henry discovered something strange. The The poison he injected did not enter his bloodstream but was concentrated near his muscle tissue. This meant that he might have been injected after death. Just then, Lucas arrived and said that he had found the victim's identity. The victim's name was Ron, a fitness trainer. He was obviously murdered. Now they needed to wait for Ron's toxicology report to find out who was responsible. Then Ron's girlfriend came to claim his body. They were planning to get married next spring, but this happened unexpectedly. She could confirm that Ron did not use drugs. Although he had a criminal record, he started working hard after he got out of prison. Joe asked Ron's girlfriend if he had acted unusually the last time they saw each other. She remembered that when he left the apartment, he was arguing with someone on the phone. She didn't know who. Ron had been missing since that night. Next, Henry and Joe went to the gym where Ron worked. Joan said he hadn't seen Ron for 4 days. Someone like Ron, who had never missed volunteer activities, suddenly missing, must be something bad. The last time they saw each other was at 9 p.m. 4 days ago, because Joan had the key here. Joan was preparing to close the shop at that time, so he remembered it very clearly. When they asked Joan if Ron had a conflict with anyone, Joan said it might be Tommy. Tommy was a famous local real estate developer. Tommy bought half of the old neighborhood, including the gym. Henry asked what happened to the wound, the corner of Tommy's eye. Joan said he got hurt while teaching the kids boxing. Then, Henry and Joe went to a nearby grocery store. In such a complicated place, the grocery store was a combination of a bank, post office, and a supermarket. Seeing the rubber road being paved by workers, Henry immediately remembered Ron's shoes. Therefore, it is speculated that the location of the body was very close to this playground, and the distance was enough for the murderer to make Ron enter the apartment. At the same time, Joe also found that Ron's phone was still ringing somewhere nearby. In other words, this place was most likely the first crime scene. Then, Joe called Ron's phone number. Very quickly, there was a slight vibration on the ground. After a while of searching, Henry finally found the phone. The call history showed that Ron's last call was to Tommy, so as a suspect, Tommy was invited to the police station for questioning. Tommy said he didn't know Ron. Tommy couldn't possibly have killed Ron. Tommy received many angry phone calls every day. He didn't even know where those people got his phone number. Now Tommy's construction site had become a crime scene, causing him heavy losses. Tommy hoped that the police could solve this case as soon as possible. Tommy then prepared to leave with his lawyer. They could not detain him just based on a phone call Ron made to Tommy. The police had no direct evidence, so they could only release Tommy. Joe quickly found another suspect, John. John had previously been involved in the Pagarelli family business. Next, the two of them monitored John for 24 hours. That night, they found him receiving a large package from Tommy and leaving. They followed John to the gym. They saw him take the package in and leave empty-handed 2 minutes later. When he drove away, two of them forced their way into the gym. Sure enough, they found the package in John's locker. Seeing that there was $6 million in cash inside, Joe guessed that he had bought the murderer. Then, Joe took John to the Henry morgue and pulled out Ron's body. After John saw it, he immediately felt a little nauseous, but his reaction was more fear. Henry asked John if it was worth killing his friend for $50,000. John said he didn't understand what Henry was saying, but the skin tissue found under Ron's ring matched John's. But John insisted that he didn't kill Ron. Henry realized that John didn't seem to be lying. The only person who knew that Ron intended to ruin the deal was Tommy. So the next day, under police surveillance, John met Tommy alone. John asked Tommy why he killed Ron. Tommy only thought that John was not satisfied with payment, but he didn't admit anything else. At this moment, Henry saw a familiar boy playing tennis, so he went up and asked the boy if he knew Ron. The boy smiled and was about to answer when he suddenly turned around as if he saw something scary. The boy didn't say a word and ran away. Henry saw John leaning against the opposite car. When Henry turned around in doubt, he saw more important information. The shadow on the wall was exactly the same as in the room where Ron was murdered. Therefore, Henry was certain that the boy definitely knew who the murderer was. Thinking about seeing the boy run away in fear, Henry suddenly realized that the boy might be in danger. They followed the direction the boy ran away to search, but only saw the bicycle thrown on the side of the road. Only then did the two realize that something was wrong. Henry thought about the boy being scared by John standing in front of the grocery store just now, unless the boy looked different at that time. At this time, the grocery store had hung a sign that said he was out of business. This further increased the boss's suspicions. Joe used the excuse of smelling smoke and rushed into the grocery store. As soon as she entered, Henry discovered the boy's tennis ball. At this time, the boss was threatening the boy in the basement. Just as he was about to kill him to silence him, Henry rushed in. The boy was finally out of danger. The boss ran out of the tunnel and onto the street. Henry chased closely behind. Unexpectedly, the boss, who was about to die, said Tommy's name. The hard-won clue was cut off. Joe thought that he deserved it for accepting bribes and harming innocent people. Henry felt that he was just a pawn manipulated by others. The evildoer was still at large, but he had to pay with his life. Fortunately, Owen from the local trade council confessed to Tommy's bribery. Plus, what happened to Ron? The nearby residents no longer wanted to sell their land. The gym was conveniently kept, and the poor children had a place to rest and relax. This also reflects the gap between rich and poor in real society. The ones who are hurt are always the poor. Gloria is the wife of a prestigious family that has selflessly donated countless famous paintings to the museum for many years. The mayor specially organized a charity party to thank her. All the celebrities and nobles attended, but Gloria always had a sardonic tongue. Even her deceased husband was mercilessly cursed by her. Her sharp words left the market speechless. This made many guests feel dissatisfied. As soon as the party reached its climax, Gloria was found dead in the cold hallway. Although the police immediately sealed off the place, many high-ranking officials who came to see her ruined the scene. Afterwards, Lucas took Gloria's body to the morgue. Her pelvis and spine had obvious fractures. There were 2 to 3 dozen large and small bruises on her body, including those on her hands and forearms. So they judged that Gloria had been murdered. Gloria was the only surviving heiress of the Carnegie family, the founder of the New York steel industry. Everyone knew about their family's wealth and power. At this moment, a beautiful girl was sitting in the tea room of the forensic department. When Lucas came to pour coffee and saw her, he was immediately fascinated. Lucas took the initiative to introduce himself as the chief forensic doctor at Gloria's crime scene. Lucas was not on guard and told her everything. Just when he wanted to go further with the girl, she packed her bag and prepared to leave. Before going out, she made a mysterious phone call. Early the next morning, the news of Gloria's murder was on the front page. Gloria's son Conrad angrily appeared at the police chief's office and criticized them for leaking this matter, which greatly affected their family. Henry also suspected that someone was talking too much and leaking the news. At this time, Lucas came to say that he was wrong and had even prepared a resignation letter. But Henry interrupted Lucas's next stupid thought. Henry told Lucas to go back to the office first and not to tell anyone about this. Then Henry took the blame for Lucas. But Conrad did not accept Henry's apology. Because of this, Conrad took away Henry's access to Gloria's body. Joe told Henry not to be sad. Although he did not have access to the body, it did not mean that they could not investigate together. The only problem was that they had to go to the museum. After Henry heard this, he stopped. But in order to let Gloria rest in peace, Henry still decided to go there. When Henry arrived at the museum door, he could not help but recall the past. At that time, he and his wife had traveled a long way to the museum, but because they did not have a new invitation, they were refused entry. I don't know what Henry said, but he told them to go. This was also the first time Henry met Gloria. The inside was still as splendid as before. It was just the people from back then were missing. Joe reminded him and pulled Henry back to reality. He only glanced at the photo and found a clue. Following the direction of these traces, he guessed that Gloria had crawled here. The starting point was this spiral staircase. Henry guessed that Gloria had been pushed down the stairs at that time. She was seriously injured and definitely couldn't move, but someone forced her to crawl forward. After she crawled 3 meters into the gallery, she died from exhaustion. So Henry guessed that there was another person here at that time. At this moment, Joe received a call from a colleague. They discovered from the surveillance camera that after Gloria left the room, a man followed her to the east side of the gallery. He sneaked behind the guard and walked without being detected. This man was Gloria's niece's boyfriend, Lance. The police quickly brought Lance in for questioning. Lance was a poor kid from the slums. Hansen found a $30,000 diamond ring at Lance's house, so they guessed that Lance was discovered stealing and killed Gloria. But Lance said that this was an engagement gift that Gloria gave him. Gloria's girlfriend's father did not agree to let him be with her. The two of them knew that Gloria believed in free love, so that day, Lance bravely went to ask her permission. At that time, Gloria gave Lance the ring and said that he had to follow his heart. Lance only felt that Gloria was very strange at that time. Someone who was usually sharp-tongued like her spoke hesitantly. She also said that there was a burning smell in the gallery. Henry heard this outside and suddenly realized that his previous guess was wrong. Gloria might not have been pushed downstairs. Gloria said that she smelled something burning because she had olfactory hallucinations. This is a typical symptom of a stroke. To confirm this guess, Henry needed to do a test on Gloria's liver. However, Henry currently had no access to Gloria's body, so Henry sought out Lucas for help. Joe also sought out Gloria's niece, hoping to learn about her medication status. However, Gloria's niece did not know anything about her condition. She only knew that Gloria was an unfeeling woman. Joe quickly found out that Gloria had removed her son Conrad from her will. Conrad was trying to regain control of his mother's villa. He was currently selling the property. At this time, Henry thought of Abe, saying that he would go to the auction. So Henry quickly called Abe. Henry hoped that Abe could take a picture of the medicines stored in Gloria's medicine cabinet. After Henry looked at it, he did not find any medicine that caused the stroke. Just when Henry Henry thought he had made a mistake, he suddenly saw Conrad's trembling hands in the office. Then when Conrad was about to leave, Henry stepped forward to stop him. Henry asked if the epilepsy medicine was phenytoin. Conrad was right, but millions of people took it. Why did Henry ask Conrad this? Henry said because it was this medicine that killed Conrad's mother. At this time, everyone was surprised. Later, Conrad was detained for questioning. He admitted that his relationship with his mother was not good, but he was also the one who understood his mother the most. When his mother threatened to remove him from the will, he had been removed long ago. He was one of the people who hoped that she would live the longest. Conrad had the best chance because only when his mother was alive would he have the chance to change his will. The police had no solid evidence, so they could only let Conrad leave temporarily. Then, Joe and Henry went to the morgue downstairs. They met Lucas rushing back from outside. Lucas, who was always strict with himself, would never be late. Under Henry's questioning, Lucas said that he had just gone to the funeral home to get Gloria's liver. Joe criticized Lucas for being too bold. If Conrad knew about this, Lucas would be sued. Unexpectedly, Henry told Lucas that this was the best thing he had ever done. Seeing this, Joe could only pretend not to hear anything. They quickly discovered that the amount of phenytoin in Gloria's body was 3 times the normal dose. But according to the analysis of her liver damage, it was used 3 hours before the party started. Gloria's nurse became the biggest suspect. At the same time, Hansen said that Gloria's will had been announced. Gloria's nurse got all the property. Everyone immediately thought of murder and robbery, but through investigation and interrogation by the police, it was found that the nurse had taken care of Gloria for 20 years and had been devoted to her. Her testimony was also not a problem. It was just that they had dinner as usual before the party. It was clearly over 20 degrees, but Gloria still felt very cold. The nurse even lit a fire to keep Gloria warm. Henry suddenly thought of something, so he rushed to Gloria's villa. Then he found an unburned piece of paper in her fireplace. Maybe the name FC was exactly the same as the anonymous painting in the gallery. Suddenly, a scream woke Henry up. The collector discovered a set of antique champagne glasses that were missing one. Henry knew Gloria never drank alcohol, but the lack of a glass was a little hard to explain. Henry found the missing champagne glass in the trunk of the car, along with a bottle of phenytoin. Henry put all the previous clues together, and suddenly he understood. Henry informed everyone and went to the museum to tell them that Gloria had done something stupid. The autopsy results showed that Gloria only had a few months to live. Gloria knew this, so she planned to die. The reason Gloria chose the night of the party was because it was a celebration of her favorite place and where she could be closest to the person she loved the most. Gloria knew she didn't have much time left, so she left party. Unexpectedly, Gloria was stopped by her niece and the boyfriend. In addition, the drug took effect early, causing Gloria to fall down the stairs. Gloria endured unimaginable pain. She crawled 3 meters, only to die in front of the painting signed by FC, because she loved the artist. Conrad also said that his father once told him that his mother loved a young artist. After he found out, he threatened her that he would destroy everything the artist had. She then compromised and stayed. He was so proud of winning her back that he never expected that he could only keep her person but not her heart. Even when he died, Gloria never forgave him. Fortunately, Gloria was able to be with the man she loved in her last moments, which can be considered a sad story with a happy ending. Henry did not want to enter this museum before because he did not want to recall the past. Under Gloria's influence, Henry proposed to his wife here. They swore that they would love each other forever. Unfortunately, his wife did not have an immortal body like him. She passed away early, leaving him with only sad memories. The movie ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again.